So this morning I was thinking about how everybody in society has these concerns about how horrible um, the trajectory of social organization is directed, and this is global, right? The people in Ghana, they say, "Man, it's horrible what's happening in this country, and how leadership is so broken." And the people in America, they say the same thing, and the people in Europe, they say the same thing, right? And there's this paradox that's at the heart of it, right? If you go out and you talk to individuals and you ask them, do you think that we should be more concerned about the poor? Do you think that we should be more concerned about education? Do you think that the feeding system and the feeding structure is broken? And everybody says, yeah, of course, man. Just last week, me and my uncle, or me and my sister, or me and my girlfriend, or me and whoever, me and my wife, that we were discussing this. And what's wild about that for me is that we all agree the direction that we're traveling is wrong, right? But it's all of us passengers just talking to each other, right? And there are a couple of monkeys, right, driving the train, and they don't seem to listen to anybody, right? And it's really strange to me that we can have a world where 90%, maybe more, 95, 99% of the people believe that where we're headed is wrong. And yet, these guys driving the trains, nobody's able to confront them, you know? And and it led me to think that one of two things must be happening, right? Either one, we're a bunch of cowards and we're terrified of the people who are driving the train, the conductors, and we don't want to confront them, or we're lying about what we think, right? We're lying about we what we complain about, right? So when a man says that, man, um, I'm out here starving without food to eat, and then you say, man, but you live in paradise, you're surrounded by all these fruits. Why don't you reach out and grab one and eat? So Camille Paglia, right? Camille Paglia is this, she's provocative, and there are people who say, well, she's in it just for the provocation. I don't think so, right? She said something that I thought was profound. She says that so there's sadomasochism, right? People who get off from torture and pain and suffering and humiliation and that sort of thing. And it's Freudian, and it's all this craziness. But what's interesting about it is that, say you live next door to this woman, right? And every night you hear her screaming, right? And um, because her husband beats her up, right? And you get up in the morning, and you're taking out your trash or whatever, and you say, Grace, is everything okay? And Grace has a beautiful smile and with a black eye, and she says that everything is wonderful. Now, you can say that Grace isn't fine at all, that Grace is an abused woman. But Camille Paglia, she says that the only person who can define abuse sometimes it's not the spectators, it's the victims, right? Now maybe there is between this man and this woman a contract that says, in the program that this man is running, that part of what my manhood consists in is the domination and subjugation of my wife. And there is in this woman her code that says that the only way that I can enter and access my sexuality is when it's extracted from me through pain. Now, if you've read any of the psychoanalytic literature, this is not shocking to you at all, because there's a man, right, who is programmed not to be soft, right, not to be soft, not to ask for love, not to be embraced, right. There's a man who will not receive what he can take by force. In fact, he prefers it. And when that man is confronted with his own desire, right? When that man comes home and he wants his wife, he wants to hold his wife's hand or to cuddle next to his wife. But his programming does not allow him, right? It's as if when that man beats his wife, right? And takes her afterwards, he is saying that, see, Dad, I'm not soft. I didn't ask for love. I took it, right? And when that woman receives this love, which is tortured and mangled, she's also saying, see, Mom, I'm not a bad girl. He made me do it, right? Now, this is a deviant, it's sort of a deviant association, right? It's kind of like this codependent mess, But for us, the spectators, right? Me sitting here in my analysis, I say to this woman, man, take responsibility for your own sexuality, And I say to this man, it's okay. It's okay to come home and not want to watch CNN and just want to take your wife's hand and sit and just listen. This is what I think, right? I think that sometimes, right, sex is the only acceptable way for a man to receive nurturing, right? Because when you're a 6-year-old boy, you can run to your mom and hug her and seek that thing that is nurturing, right? That is warm and soft and embraces us. But by the time you're 13, if every time you hug your mom, your dad says, don't be a sissy, go be a man, right? And then you discover that your dad beats your mom, and that also constitutes what manhood is. And so you find yourself, when you start dating this woman who becomes your wife, picking up fights, right? Picking up fights. Because you see, I think the genius of Camille Paglia is a recognition that our physiology is very binary, right? It is very binary. And what that means is that when a man touches a woman, anyway, by force or with softness, some switch goes off in his brain. And that switch, it doesn't care. I'll give you an example, right? So recently in the news, right, there's all this talk about the fast mimicking diet, right? It turns out that if you eat 600 calories a day, I did the numbers for me. If I eat 600 calories a day, I can trick my body into thinking that I'm in starvation mode. And then it goes in and it dismantles all the senescent cells in my body, right? And it burns them for fuel, right? That's what they gave the Japanese guy the Nobel Prize for, autophagy, right? And so now it's really interesting that my body, it's so dumb that it doesn't know that I'm really not starving, right? It just says, hey, we expected 2,000 calories and homie's just giving us 600. So it turns out that there's this whole machinery that is built and designed into the human organism that has the capacity of self-healing, but it needs a trigger, right? And that trigger It's very digital. It's zeros and ones. I think that much of human experience is like that, And for me, that's what Richard Feynman said, right? The joy of finding things out. For me, the beauty of um, of scientific endeavor is the ability to flip the coin, right? To see that when when you hear your neighbor's wife screaming at night and you're thinking to yourself, man, they got to do something about that relationship. I don't know. They need to go to therapy or something. You need to understand that that marriage is therapy, right? The brokenness that's there, the violence, the aggression, that is their therapy, you know? Why is this interesting? This is interesting because I think that sometimes it's enough to see, right? It's enough to be able to see. Because we live in a world where we have come to a place of recognizing that reality is no longer accessible to us, right? Like that is really the scientific revolution. The scientific revolution is not building jet engines and planes. It is the recognition that reality, the thing that we are all groping and grasping for, that it's inaccessible to us except to the physicists and the mathematicians, right? And I thought it was really interesting. So recently I read Entanglement, right? And it's this beautiful record of, quantum physics and how it came to be and all the people, the major players and their relationship with it. And there's this anecdote which I thought was like really awesome, right? So Schrodinger, right? This German guy, he gets to a place and he and Einstein, right? They cannot imagine, right? They cannot imagine what the math is predicting. And Unpflichtheiten is what I think it's called in German. So there's a German word, right, that translates into the ability of something to be amenable to imagination, which is to say that there's some things that are so easy to imagine, and so they're accessible to human imagination, right? So Einstein, his main qualm, right, with the implications or what quantum mechanics was leading to was that it was beyond imagination. He couldn't imagine it. And I thought it was such a wild thing, right? That the man who said that imagination was more important than, was it knowledge or something like that? Something to the effect that what is of prime importance is imagination. That he had come to the limits of his imagination. Right? Because isn't that what Newton kicked off, right? What Newton said was that you take this equation, right? And it predicts that Neptune is going to be orbiting at this distance from the Earth and is going to be visible at these times. Even though nobody's seen Neptune before, we give it a couple hundred years and we find out that there's this ginormous body that nobody had ever seen, but the math had predicted. The math had predicted. I'm really fascinated by mathematics because of its relationship with beauty. And I think that beauty is also like this thing that we haven't confronted, because I don't think that very many things have the courage to sustain themselves beyond the curtain of beauty, right? What I was saying originally was the fact that imagination ends where mathematics begins, right? So right now, the theoretical physicists, they tell us that if you want to really understand reality, if you want to get into the quarks and the leptons and and the mesons and the bosons and the whatever the hell other particles they are discovering now at CERN, that you need to do the math. That is to say that it's like the movie Riddick, right? Where, or how, bats echolocate, if you will, right? You no longer need vision because vision cannot be trusted, right? Because vision is mediated, is what we're finding. That scientifically, vision is mediated. That before the signals hit your lenses, they have been modified by both your mind and the atmosphere, right? It's insane, man. It's like such an awesome time to be alive, because what this means is that, so Mandelbrot, right? He was this guy who, I think that he originated the ideas about fractals and how things are miniaturized, and how you take a little piece of the seashore, and then you extrapolate it, and then you get a whole seashore, and there's this miniaturization that's in everything, right? When I was reading this book, Entanglement, and listening to the lecture on autophagy, right? One of the things that struck me was that inside of ourselves, right? It's as if you have this very tiny equation, right? And it's responsible for everything. You get the whole universe from this tiny little thing. So it turns out that inside of your cell, there's food in the form of organs, right? And sometimes when you trigger a starvation state, or a nutrient poor, I think is the expression they use in the literature, a nutrient poor environment, well, your cell goes to work, and then it digests itself, starting with the things that it needs the least, right? That is why a vacuole in a plant cell is so huge. I thought that it was really interesting how this is precisely what our bodies are doing, right? You take material that has been constructed from outside, you put it inside, your body breaks it down, extracts what it needs, and shunts the rest. So where I started going with this on my rant was, the physics is just too interesting for me. I think that it's really fascinating that we get to this space, right, where the scientists are telling us what the priests have always said. We're sort of coming back to what Malraux said, right? Albert Malraux was this French philosopher, and he said that the 21st century is going to have to be spiritual, or it's not going to be, right? And there are all these people who said that, there are all these French philosophers, Lacan and all the rest of them, and they say these things that you have to make one of two conclusions about, right? Either the man was crazy, or he was high. No, either the man was like crazy, or accessing a medium that is inaccessible to us, right? Now, this is what I think Malraux meant when he said that the 21st century was going to be spiritual, or it wasn't going to be, was that when a man gets to a place where he needs faith for his science to work, and that is what physics is asking us for right now. It's saying that, okay, that's what Bohr and his people, they were telling to Einstein and Schrodinger. They were saying that, listen, yes, we know that what we're describing, it cannot be imagined, and it's like, if you come at it from imagination, it's impossible, but the math works. So trust the math, trust the numbers. I think that's a very interesting proposition, right? It's as if a man were to go to a woman and say that, by all the metrics, I am not a fit partner for you, but I want you to trust this equation, right? Don't listen to your mom, and don't listen to your friends who say that this relationship won't work. Don't listen to nobody. Just trust this equation. And I thought to myself, that's wild, man. That's wild. That the equation alone will get us there. And they're right, the math works out, which leads me to think, I was going to talk about this in another video, but it leads me to think that if you call it God or whatever it is that put us here, that they had to know some math, right? Because I think math is how you get the plan out of the mind of God onto the canvas of creation, right? I think if you're God and you're this master architect, right? And you call your angels and you say, you spread out all of the canvas of the universe, and you say, Earth goes there, and the aurora borealis goes there, and the Milky Way galaxy fits here, and the distance from us to Alpha Centauri is going to be this long. That is how math works. There's no other justification for it. Which, if it's true, right, it leads us to suppose that this does have to be a simulation. And if it is, then we're back to Vedic thought, right? That it's all Maya. It's all a design. And we, the agents who are plunged into this matrix, that we have to be careful not to become too enmeshed in it, right? It's just like our video games, right? That death is just like in Mortal Kombat, right? When you die, and then you click reset, and then you spawn back alive, right? And Orchid just got defeated, but she's here again, right? And she fights on. The 21st century is going to have to be spiritual, or it's not going to be. Because when our tools have gotten so sophisticated that we can navigate blind, we need faith. And our tools are so sophisticated that we are navigating blind. But we can trust the math. We don't need vision anymore. And so he says, blessed are they who have not seen and yet believe, because they have done the algebra and the calculus, and it checks out. It checks out. The algebra and the calculus checks out. I don't know what beauty is for, That is my main concern, My dominant self-expression is the artistic outlet. And the question for me has always remained, what is beauty for?